but thanks so much for joining me this morning. So my name is Mackenzie Franklin from SideGameLLC, and this is our special guest, John Franklin. And go ahead and introduce who you are.
Hello, I'm John Franklin, and I'm Mackenzie's dad. Yeah, so I've had a lot of gaming experience. It's been years that I've been in the gaming area, gaming community. I started out back when games were in their infancy. I don't know if you can remember way back then, but in the 70s, most of the games out there were board games, and in the late 60s. And so I was born in the 60s. And I started gaming. I was introduced to, of course, simple games. Growing up, you get into those card games and board games, such as Monopoly. I'm sure all the familiar ones. And also, then my brother, who's about 6 years older than me, he really introduced me into what then were called war games. And war games are what we call board games now. But they were generally more simulations of combat or events or things like this. And there was even a company called SPI, which is Simulation Publication Incorporated, out of New York City. And they were big into that. They were very rules heavy, but they're great simulations. And then another company, Avalon Hill, they produced other kinds of genres. A game what they had was Acquire, which was a business game where you collect, invest, or you acquire other companies, and those might be your opponents. And it was a different way to play. And so it took the board games that we knew then, Monopoly et al., to a higher level. And so it was very enjoyable.
I've actually played Acquire. That was one of the first games that I played when getting into this hobby. So it's a really highly praised game from one of the earlier publishing companies. So that's
exactly
really cool.
Yeah, I actually still have our game. It was my brother's, and we still have it. It's at my mother's house in New Mexico. Yep. So gaming has been with me for years and years. And it's very interesting. I've been able to see how gaming has changed through the years, through the decades. Yeah, I'm that old. And starting with, we took board games to that advanced level, and then combat games with, let's see, what's the company? Oh, Avalon Hill, of course. They came out with two games called Panzer Leader and Panzer Blitz. And those were big time introductions to combat simulation and detailed battles using strategy and tactics and measure. It was more than just an odds ratio. It was actually simulating the actual firepower between the cannons, or the caliber of the gun on the tank, the armor of the tank, the men and what they are capable of doing, and then the outcome is set up so that it's odds in the favor of success, and then you roll a die or dice depending on the table, and you would achieve success, and what degree of success depending on what it was that was going on. So that was kind of the first stuff, and then it blew up from there. There were games all over the map that simulated combat, simulated other actions, and then just then in the 70s. Now, yes, science fiction has been around a long time. Think of Edgar Rice Burroughs, but it hadn't been in the gaming realm until the 70s, and so you had even different kinds of fantasy as well that came in and came out through games, and so you got into games that simulated those kind of genres, and it blew up. And then of course there was Dungeons and Dragons that came out by originally Gary Gygax before he sold it to TSR, which is another company, and they published it, and it just grew like wildfire. And then now it's really funny, Mackenzie, you go to a convention, Gen Con, I believe it's still in Indianapolis.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, at the I don't remember where the Indianapolis Colts play. It's the big oil dome.
Yes.
Yeah, I just don't remember the name of it. But that's where it is. It's gotten so big. I went to some of the early ones, and it was called Gen Con because it started in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. So it became Geneva Convention, Gen Con. At the time, I was in my residency when I went, and so I got to go to that. It was a lot of fun, and it was big, and I even hosted a game while I was there. I played a role-playing game. I was the game master for a role-playing game, and it was wild. It was packed. So then it was big, and it just grew and grew. And then when you started going, it was in Indianapolis. How many people attend now?
I'd say thousands. It's packed.
No, it's got to be tens of thousands.
I
Because
honestly
the pictures
don't know.
that you've shown me.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it's just crazy. So gaming then in the 70s, it really blossomed into the 80s, and then computers came out, and everyone wanted to do all this stuff on computer, and so many different programs came out so that it would do the simulating for you and you could play through the game, and actually board games took a hit, and the popularity dropped at that time, and gaming kind of suffered. But then people found that there was a lack of that interaction. You know, gaming gives you a lot of things. It allows you to draw people together, and you know, it's a way to bring people together, and it's a way to socialize. It's kind of hard to do that via computer, especially at the time they didn't have all the internet action that we have now, where you can get online and you can deal with all sorts of people just like we are now and see and interact. But then it wasn't that was not the case. So computer gaming was very closed, and it was also not as the graphics weren't good. The speed wasn't good. The programs weren't as good. Right. And so it took wildfire, but then it lost its momentum because it just lacked all those other things. And you know, there are other things that you learn in games. You can learn a lot of people while playing games. Learn about their character and about the way they behave and how they are as people outside the gaming, because you know, they can be underhanded, or they can be conniving, you know, or other traits like that, or they can be gregarious and easygoing and, you know, humble. All those, I mean, it's amazing. And as a result, as you're playing, games actually change people's behaviors, because they have to adapt to the group, or the group's going to kind of say, you know, you're kind of a jerk, or you know, and you're out of there. So games, they change people's behavior, and you learn about yourself. Those that are able to learn, and usually when you start gaming, you're gaming maybe in your teens, but you're definitely in your 20s and then older. I mean, those are ages that you can change. You know, when you get to be an old dog like me, you're done. No, I'm teasing. And then the beauty about it, I found because I'm now a father, I've been a father for quite a while. I got 7 kids. Mackenzie's, what are you, number 3?
Number 3.
Yeah, yep. Number 3. Yeah, I have to count, you know. When were you born? Okay. And anyway, so I've always discovered that, you know, games, and I've learned this, they educate you about things. They educate you about the genre, the theme, you know, where it's set at, the components of the game. Like if it's a war game, it could be a simulation about a famous battle, or about the weapons that were used, or the tactics. You know, why did Hitler cross into the Eastern Front and attack Russia in the Barbarossa campaign, and what delayed him down going to Yugoslavia to knock them, because he got upset, and that delayed. You know, there's so much history that you learn, and that's just war. There's so much other ways that you learn. I'm going to demonstrate that in some of my selections today. You know, yeah, and then it teaches you different approaches to problems, and you learn how to problem solve. And a lot of times these are skills that you don't get someplace else until maybe later on. You know, like you kids all the time, you guys were way ahead of the curve against your peers in any kind of looking ahead, outcome, strategy, predictability, all those kind of things. You kids, I'm talking about my children, you, Mackenzie, I mean, Jordan and Claire and Abby and so forth, you know, Jasmine and Reese and Nicole. I mean, all of you were just heads and shoulders above your peers in outwitting and you know, deducing things going on and that kind of stuff, because you played games. So they teach those kind of skills, you know, probabilities, strategy, tactics, outcome predictions, quick calculations, estimations, and then the social skills, which I kind of alluded to. You know, winning with humility, losing with grace. Boy, because some of these games can get pretty competitive. There's
Absolutely.
one. Yeah. You remember Junta, right?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Junta came out in 1975, maybe 76. But and I started playing that when I was in high school. And oh, it's a cutthroat game. You can just cut somebody out for a bit, and everyone can gang up on somebody, and it's right there in front of you. You know, it's you're out of here. But the game gives you mechanics that you can get back in the game by doing a coup. So it's, you know, it's a pretty cool game, but you got to have some tough skin to play certain games, and you find out about yourself and other people and what kind of games you play. Like parlor games, I call parlor games, which are like Trivial Pursuit, Pictionary, and charades, and all these kind of games. Taboo. Those are very friendly, and the competition isn't so bad. So it's a different kind of game. Those are the kind of games my wife likes to play, but she will not play all those heavy competitive games. She does not like that. And I know that some of my children's spouses are that way too.
My wife is very much, she will love to play those styles of games that are a little bit more in your face and cutthroat, but not if it's just with me. So if there's a big group, as long as she's not the only one who's lost, then she feels a little bit better about what's going on. But thanks, Dad, so much for this quick overview and history of kind of your gaming career. It's definitely agreed that gaming is a huge educational tool. It's got this great varied history, and it's definitely a mainstay in my growing up and yours for sure. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into our lists of our, in total, we're going to be talking about our top 10 games of our childhoods.
Oh, I thought it was top 5.
Five, yes. So you've got 5 and I've got 5. Together we'll have our top 10.
I have some honorable mentions, but okay,
perfect.
5.
We'll go ahead and save those honorable mentions for the end. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the list. So Dad, I'm going to have you start off. Go ahead and give us your number 5, please.
Okay, my number 5, and I've got it here because it is, I don't know if y'all can see that, Snoopy and the Red Baron, a skill and action game, and it's by Milton Bradley. Now, this is the 1970 edition. So it's a hand-eye coordination game, and as you get better at it, you know, you get a true sense of anticipation, because the way it works is the marbles. What you do is you have to start off with, I don't know, it's a very visual game. Can you see that, Mackenzie? All right. So up here, it's a 2-player game, and one person has a set of 8 marbles, white and blue, 4 and 4, and they have to pass them down this chute, and it slides down the slide and out, and then your opponent has to catch them in the doghouse. Now it's missing the Snoopy, because either you're Snoopy or you're the Red Baron shooting at Snoopy. And the idea is to catch the white marbles, but not the blue marbles. And then for every white marble, you score a point. For every blue marble, you lose a point. You can't go below 0. And the idea is the first one to 10 wins. So it's a quick action game where you're flipping the. Okay, there we go. So you're flipping it. Oh, you got a good picture of it. So you're flipping it and you're catching. But for a kid, it's wild, because you get to figure out, you know, how to play both sides. So there's a mastery of both roles. You've got the action where you're flipping, and you've got the action of putting down the marbles, and then you can change the degree of difficulty by bringing up the slide bar or pulling it down, and so you can see more of the slide, the chute. As you can see on that picture, there's the Red Baron is actually further down, so it's a very difficult. You only get a little bit of time to react, and that gives the difficulty rating. So if you're playing with someone who's really good, or an adult versus a kid, you know, you can change the difficulty rating. But the neat thing about the game is just the anticipation of that marble. Even when you're an adult, you're having to flip, and you have to decide, am I getting the blue one or the white one? And the Red Baron, who's delivering the marbles, that person can hesitate and feign, and it's just and it's just going to be so agonizing. And then you get that little pleasure about, okay, well, which one I'm going to put in first. So now all of you kids, all my kids, I keep saying you, all of my kids have played this game growing up, and now I got other kids playing it. I take it to certain when I'm meeting with other adults to do things and they have their kids, I bring this game along and they just get a kick out of it. It's just a fun little game.
I'm really happy you put this on this list because I did not put it on mine. I had some really high contenders because there's still games from my list that I play constantly. So I really like this one. I definitely remember that tension. And you're totally correct here. You have that differences of the sides. So this is very asymmetric play and a dexterity element. And I really enjoy that. I think this is a great pick, Dad. Well done.
That's why Cool School, is that it? Cool School with the penguins?
Ice Cool.
Ice Cool. Okay, Ice Cool. That's it. Now, where you have to flick the penguins over places. It's a dexterity game, but it's not so easy. Those kind of fun games, and then you throw people into the mix. I like that game because it has multiple players and some people who are really good at it. I pride myself on being a good flicker, but it's unpredictable.
Absolutely. And I think that's what makes a good dexterity game. Well, thanks so much, Dad. That's a great pick, in my opinion. I think you did awesome. Sweet. Now, let's go ahead and jump into my number 5. Now, this game is a collectible style game where you're going to be opening up packs. And in these packs, you're going to have 3D models. And these 3D models, you're going to be putting on a giant play space. And this play space represents the ocean. Now, this game is going to be Pirates of the Spanish Maine. So I love this game. I think that this game is so freaking fun. So the whole premise of the game is you are going to take some points, and you'll use those points to build up this army of pirate ships, or it could be Navy ships or whatever. And the whole idea is you're trying to either go get treasure or sink your opponent's ships. So there's 2 different ways to really win. And you can do whatever you like with the kind of army that you're building. But Pirates of the Spanish Maine is super cool. It has a lot of customization. There were a lot of sets that came out, and they even had sets that were named after the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, which were popular at the time. So the models themselves are really cool. I'll find some pictures here for you, but they're built out of these separate masts, and the more masts that your ship had, the more life that your ship had as well.
So each card in the packet was a punch card. In the punch card, you'd push out the parts of the ship, and it was, if you've seen 3D puzzles, you put these 2-dimensional plastic forms together into a 3-dimensional ship. And so you can see the pictures there.
Yes.
And so there were all kinds of ships, and they were actually pretty accurate, and it's just fun to play them as a miniatures game. It's well done for what it was. So you could actually see the ships. You could actually, and they even had the little flags, the banners on top of the masts, so that you could have them flowing with the wind. The detail was pretty neat.
And you can see it here on the top of the mast here, the center mast. You could see that flag flowing in the wind. So I really enjoy the kind of the layout of this game. You could play it wherever you like, as long as you have an empty table. All the game pieces came in each pack of the cards. So you had crew members that you could use. You had islands that you kind of set around the board. And then you had the randomized treasure tokens, which could even include some cursed treasure in future expansions. Now, they added a lot to this game in regards to variability. They had different nations that you could play as. They had things like sea monsters and submarines. They just had a lot of great ideas in this little package. Crew members, yep. So they had all sorts of
treasures. All sorts of items.
It was
great. You would
great.
go from island to island to try and collect different treasures, because it was Pirates of the Spanish Maine, and you try and sink your opponent's ships. And it was a tabletop game, so you could play it anywhere. And they used a simple measuring. One of the cards either had a short or a long, and that was how you measured distance. And then you fired cannons at one another. And if you can look closely on the picture there, each mask has the picture of a 6-sided die face. And that's the roll that you had to make to be successful in hitting. And you would cause the ship to be derelict when all the masts were removed, because each hit would remove a mast, and you would lose your cannon if you'd have a mast lost, and then you would sink if, of course, all the masts were gone. And yes, it includes submarines and such. Now,
cool.
the pictures you're seeing here, somebody's laid a blue field and has three-dimensional islands that they've crafted, but it comes with islands that are just just
little punch outs.
Card stock, yeah, punch outs. And so there's an example of it. Now, what's really wild is Mackenzie didn't know this, but there was a couple games, one's called Frigate and one other one Dreadnought, put out by SPI back in the 70s. I have both of those, and we used to, when I was a kid, we would make Lego ships. We would build ships out of Lego, and we'd use those as the pieces for these two games. And like the sinking of the Bismarck was one of the scenarios in Dreadnought, which is a World War II battleship game simulation. And we would have the miniatures of the battleships built by us. So somebody built the Bismarck and the Hood, and we would battle out using these miniatures. So when this game came along, I just devoured it. So I've got a box full of these miniatures.
Now, I don't know where mine are.
I have really yours, Mackenzie.
You have mine. Okay,
yes, cool. Because you said at the time, you said, because you were moving and you didn't, you just couldn't, but you wanted them. So I said, no problem, I'll keep them. And that's what I've done with my kids. For instance, I had all the Harry Potter cards because that's the thing with my children. I've played all of their games. And I was a competitor with them. So, and I never eased up. So they always had a hard competitor. And when they started beating me, they knew they were good.
So I really like this game, Pirates of the Spanish Main. I think it's a great introduction to these kind of miniature style games. The short, long system on the cards is great for that intro to measurement. And I think it's just a really well done package, easy to get into, and you're excited to buy packs of these cards. So that's my number 5, Pirates of the Spanish Main. Let's go ahead and jump to our number 4s. So, Dad, go for it. What do you got here?
I'm just having great memories of that.
Oh, yeah. I remember. Yep. I remember setting this up on, we had this large pool table, and that's what we had set these things up on, and we'd be all surrounded, and it was just fun. It was really cool to see this.
It was fun. Okay. So number 4 on my list is Masterpiece, the art auction game, and it was put out by Parker Brothers, and there were several versions, but the one that I have is the 1971, and I've carried that through the years, and I would show you a copy, so you'll have to pull one up, Mackenzie. Well, I'd show you my copy, but one of my children has it because she likes it so much. My daughter Claire, who's in Lincoln, she's a teacher there, and so she loves that game, and so that's where it is. I miss it. Yeah. So Masterpiece. I think it's all one word. Anyway, so the neat thing about it is that it's a game set in, or it has masterpieces, famous paintings, very valuable paintings, and then each edition had different. The paintings were from different art museums. I'm trying to think, the Chicago Museum of Art. And then there's the London Museum of Art. I'm not sure which one that one was. Then there's another museum. And so what they did is each edition took a different set of 24 paintings. And the paintings it just made it great because you're looking at these masterpieces and they span time. They had some that were very recent. Then they had Picasso, Van Gogh, and this just going on down back, Da Vinci, etc. So the paintings, I love the paintings. And so when you see them in real life and there's something comes up about it, like reminiscing about Marilyn Monroe and some of the others, there's one called Nighthawks that is by Edward Hopper, and it's a reminiscent painting. And you immediately identify it and you say, oh yeah, I know where, and you know where it came from. Masterpiece. Well, on with the pictures or the paintings. Yeah, so that's a different version there because I don't remember those. Yeah, so like I said, they come from different art museums and collections. And that was the other nice thing about it. So for Parker Brothers, it survived so long because it had such variability with the new additions, and they kind of remastered it. But anyway, the way it works is the object is to make the most money by the end of the game. And you do that by selling the paintings, or by buying the paintings, or bidding at auctions. That's my dog barking. My daughter's coming in the door. Sorry. So anyway, and then the board, as you can see, you move around the board, and then you do different actions depending on what you land on. And you can collect from the bank various amounts of money. You can collect even paintings from the bank. You buy paintings for various amounts. You inherit a painting, and then there's a bank auction space and a private auction space. And in the private auction, the players they can bid on your painting, but they're not required to. But the person to the left gets to choose which painting, and then the highest bidder pays you for the painting, and you give it over. And then the bank auction, well, everyone bids on one that hasn't been isn't out yet, from the bank. And so those 24, and the money, the values of the paintings range from about 100,000, I think it's 100,000 to $1 million, and you're trying to have the most money at the end of the game. And so each painting there are these value cards, and the value cards are matched with the back of the painting. And so you match them together, and only the viewer knows what it's worth. And those values, or rather, and they're 2 forgeries. So they're worth nothing. And so if you get a forgery, you try and get rid of it, either sell it to the bank or sell it to an opponent. And so that's how it plays out. So, there's a lot of, it's just simple dice rolling, moving around on the game board and doing what it says. And there's a great deal of luck in here because it depends on what you land on. But what brings the game to being really fun, more than just the paintings, is sticking it to your opponent when you do a forgery, or buying something that off your opponent for a reduced rate, and it's actually worth more. Things like that. And then also the other way, or the flip side, is when you get something that's worth a lot and you haven't paid much for it, and or getting that inherited a painting. It's just it's such a randomness that, as you know, with random things, it kind of, in the end, the game's long enough that it kind of balances out. So there is a little bit of strategy in how you bid and how you protect your paintings, and anyway, it's pretty good. So I like selling a forgery for a big profit. That was always my favorite thing.
My favorite thing in this has to be the fact that as you play, those paintings that have the values, eventually they're going to get passed around to potentially multiple people before you can sell them off to the bank. So you and 4 other players might know the value of a specific painting, but as soon as one guy gets it, you're like, we all knew exactly how much that was, and now you're stuck with it. Things like that. It can be really funny, or you can pretend that it's a high value painting, but it's really up to the players to kind of play this field. So I really like this one. I think this is another great pick, John. This is great.
And another beauty about it is anyone can play. If you really don't understand the whole idea of value and such, you're still in the game because you're constantly getting these paintings, and then you as you play, you get an idea of really what's going on. And so it really, you could have a mix of ages and understandings. That's another beauty about it. It's a real good game.
I think it's a great choice. It really reminds me to like a precursor of the game Modern Art. Have you played that? It has that similar feature where you're taking all these paintings from artists and you're doing a lot of auctions to sell them, but that game is more purely for the auction side. In this version, though, it's more of like a secret value, and I think that's cool. It definitely makes the games a little bit different, and I think it definitely deserves to be on this list. Great choice. Yeah, this is a great choice.
Thanks. And as you see, so far you've played both of the games that I've said.
Yeah, go figure. It's like I'm your son or something. All right. So let's go ahead and jump to my number 4. My number 4 is a game that you introduced me to, and it has kind of set this standard of a game that has multiple currencies to win. So the game that I'm talking about today is called Careers. So in Careers, we are going to be talking about your profession. So you can start off and you're going to pick some type of profession that you want to join. Now, these professions can either give you happiness or fame. For example, if in the game it portrays if you're going to be a teacher, then you're probably doing it for the happiness more than you are doing it for the fame. But if you're doing an astronaut, it's going to be a lot of hard work when you're doing it for that fame. So it has these achievements. And at the start of the game, you're going to pick a path that you want to take. And based on the path you take, it's going to, you decide how many fame points and how many happiness points you want. You kind of pair these two things up, and then based on your score that you've chosen, that's your own personal win condition. So if you've put 20 hearts and 10 fame, then you're going to want to do some jobs that you really will have a great time doing as opposed to fame. So I like that right from the beginning. You get to pick your own personal win conditions, and then you get to just start heading towards that goal based on the paths that you can choose out on that mission. Now, the board itself is separated by these squares, and each of these squares is going to be its own start to a path. So you can either get an opportunity, and that's what those gold cards are, and these let you enter a job space. So you're kind of just like normal life, you're going to be waiting to find that perfect job. And then once you find an actual job, you might just take it just because you need a job so you can start earning some points. It's a wonderful game. So love this one. And you said that you've played this. Go ahead and tell me about it then. What are the things you enjoy about this game?
Well, actually, this is my number 3 pick.
Hey, awesome.
Yeah. So I was just looking at the board that you have there. Here's my board. So yep, there's the careers that I've known well. So I think this one's a 1971 edition. So yeah, careers. So just like you said, you know, the object is to complete the success formula, and you have to get 60 points, but you can do it in any way you want. And the 60 points is, you could do like 15 hearts and got to add up to 60 real quick, and 15 stars, which is fame, hearts, or happiness, and then $30,000. So it's in thousands of dollars. Oh wow, multiple.
Yeah, there's lots of different languages of this game.
Yeah, different languages. Anyway, so and you do that by going around the board, and you can enter different careers. And on the careers, the career paths is where you really collect the fame and the happiness and the money. And the outer board is where you give yourself advantages to doing things like opportunity knocks, where those are cards that allow you to go to the entrances of different careers, and sometimes they allow you to go with free or with reduced cost or something like that. And each of the careers, as you enter the careers, you can get experience. And as you exit a career, if you successfully go through the path, you get one of those experience cards, and they allow you to move 1 to 4, depending on the card you have, in place of a die roll, in place of your dice roll. So it's 2 6-sided dice. And
about careers, this was my number 4, your number 3, and I was on a talk about the different currencies and how some games do it differently. So one game that I was talking about was Tales of the Arabian Nights. In that game, you're going to be doing random events, and those random events will just give you one of the currencies. You're not really sure what's going to give you what. You could do something that would logically give you like fame or something, and it'll give you happiness, and you're like, okay, whatever. It's really hard to track this. But in careers, if you actually look at the board has spaces that tell you what you could potentially get. So you have some sort of prediction as to what the rewards you're going to get are. So you have something that you can plan and strategize for. Once again, if you want to get that happiness, try to go into teaching. If you want fame and money, maybe going into big business is the way to go. So there's a lot of cool choices. And sports, yeah, absolutely. So there's lots of really cool choices that are laid out for you, and I really like that in careers.
And it's a different game every time you play, and it allows multiple players. So it gives a good level of competition. Everyone is trying to speed ahead, and you don't know exactly where your opponent is as far as the end game, because you don't know exactly how your opponent's 60 points is split up between monies, fame, and happiness. And then there are the nuances, the hospital and the unemployment and the Hawaiian holiday, where if you end up in the hospital, you're stuck there until you roll, until you roll 5 or less on 2 dice, or you pay half your salary. And then if you go to unemployment, you're stuck there until you roll doubles, or you pay half the money that you have on hand. So, it can be devastating. And you can actually land on your opponent's spot. So if you land on the same place as your opponent, which can happen pretty frequently, especially when you're inside a career path, because on the outside of the board, you're rolling 2 dice. So, your numbers are anywhere from 2 to 12, with 7 being the most common roll, bell curve. And then on the inside of the career paths, it's a 6-sided die. So there's a good chance that you're going to bump into somebody. And if you do land on that spot, you can negotiate with that person not to bump that person. And that person can say, well, I'll give you an experience card. I'll give you 2 opportunity cards. I'll give you $10,000 if you don't bump me. All depends on how desperate the person is you're bumping. Because when you get bumped, you end up in unemployment. And you're out of that career path, so you can't complete it. And it just messes up your game. So there's that element to it. These little areas that you can get messed up and slowed down. And
it sounds bad to say that you appreciate extortion. So I think
but it lends an element to the game that it's not just rolling and doing things. Which that gets old. This is truly a game where you're trying to calculate the best places to go to maximize the points that you can get and increase your salary or maximize your hearts or whatever it is. And everyone's doing the same thing. And you have sometimes even purposes, sometimes you have cross purposes. And that's what makes the game a beauty. And that's why it's both of our lists. Well, I'm kind of tickled that so far we've had a couple of games that are on both of our lists.
That's pretty cool. Like super close as well. That's awesome. I'm glad that you've had as much fun playing with us than the same way that I've had fun playing the games. So I think that's really neat.
Yeah, and this game is a game that we are still playing. It's not like, that's why I have it available, because it's still being played.
Absolutely. All right, let's go ahead and jump to my number 3. And this game you actually mentioned earlier in the list. It's not one of your picks, but you mentioned it. It's based off of a popular IP. So it's a game that came out at the peak of TCGs. Everybody was just making a TCG for anything at this point. A lot of them died after about 2 years. The player base just wasn't there for a lot of them, and a lot of them just didn't have continuous support or competitive play. But this game is the Harry Potter the TCG. So I was in 2nd grade when the first Harry Potter movie came out, and with that came a wave of Harry Potter merchandise, books, all sorts of board games and card games dedicated to Harry Potter. And the Harry Potter TCG was pretty dang fun, and it was actually supported by our hobby community here. Well, not here, but back in Omaha, Nebraska. So there was a place that you could go in order to bring out the game and play with other people, and they had promos and stuff that you could win. And the game itself, I thought, was a lot of fun. So in Harry Potter the TCG, the premise is you are trying to make your opponent's deck run out of cards. So each player's deck is 60 cards, and all you got to do is completely make them either draw their cards or discard all the cards from the top of their deck. So your deck is your health. And I thought that was a really cool concept. You don't need additional counters or anything. You just bring out your deck of cards and you're ready to go. It also featured this system where you yourself were a witch or a wizard. So you would pick one of the characters from the Harry Potter franchise, and that would be you. So your card could never get removed. It was an ability that you had that you could take into the game and use. And I thought it was just a really cool concept for the Harry Potter TCG. So the Harry Potter TCG features a lesson system. So you're going to be playing these books in front of you, and they represent the different types of magic in the game. And in order to play your cards, all you have to simply do is have a specific number of these lessons out in front of you. So if you have a For example, if you want to play this Charms card that costs 6, you would need to have at least 6 lessons in front of you, and one of them needs to be a Charms. So it really added a way that you could mix your cards between the different colors, and you could play a lot of different spells. And I thought that was really cool. There was a lot of powerful deck building strategies that you could make, but one reason that this game kind of fell off, I think, for a lot of people was because there was one type of card that was a little bit too strong, and we saw this a lot in the tournament scene, and that was the creatures decks. So creatures just kind of sat there, and every turn they would do damage, and if you had a deck that was based on just putting out creatures, you could really just continuously compile that damage. And if they're dealing 1 and 2 damage a turn, but you have many creatures that are doing this, that opponent's deck is going to run out very quickly, especially if they don't have ways to counter these creatures, or if they just don't really have their own creatures of their own. They're too busy worrying about your creatures to deal with you. So I think that it definitely had some balance issues, but the game itself was a lot of fun. We played in these tournaments at Zany Brainy. It was eventually, unfortunately, turned into an art store, but Zany Brainy had these really cool tournaments, and they gave out really neat promo cards, and it was really funny. My brother and I, Jordan, we both just swept these tournaments. So whenever we went, we came in with our creature decks, and we would just eliminate the competition. I don't think they understood that the pure value that the creatures had. They were trying to go for more of like character builds and stuff, but we were coming in from this very competitive mindset, and of course practicing with you, so we had all of this strategy and just ruthlessness to our gameplay. It was pretty funny.
Yeah, you guys really were tough competitors, and you quickly would figure out how to win, what the winning strategy, the best moves, the best cards. And the cards were neat because there are all kinds of spells, and of course a lot of the spells were right out of Harry Potter and any of the books. And so that's really what made it neat to play, is because you felt like you're right in this setting. That's why I love the game. And then they also had the cards themselves were pretty neat, the artwork, and then they had these special cards that were holographic, and then if you, let's see, I don't remember where we got them, but there were some it was a kids meals or some place where you could go and get special.
The movie. So if we went to go to the first 2 movies, you got promo cards for the game as well. Right. And I love that the cards themselves, they use the artwork of this, I forget who this artist is, but they use his artwork's rendition of Harry Potter, which I think is really refreshing. It's not movie stills or anything like that. It's very fresh and very cool artwork. So I really love the art style they went for this game.
Yeah, because then it lends to a connection to the book rather than, oh, it's just the movies. No, it's the books. And so it brings it all together. So you visualize it in your head by reading the books, you see it in the movies, and here they are on the cards, and it enabled you to actually live out some of the Harry Potter theme.
Now, unfortunately, this game did not last that long. It only got to Chamber of Secrets and only 1 pack into Chamber of Secrets. So it fell victim to what some people call the 2-year curse of a card game. It just doesn't last past those first 2 years. But I had a lot of fun with this one. I thought it was a blast. I like the system of that deck management, but I just think it was a fun experience. I still have some of these cards at my house. And I actually have a cube that I've made for Harry Potter. So a cube is have this customized, curated experience for a specific card game, but you don't need to have a bunch of decks pre-built. The players will build the deck as they play. So I think it's a really cool system, and it's one that I've kept in the library here. All right, Dad, so what is your number 2? Let's go ahead and move forward. Okay,
my number 2 is a classic game. I mentioned it earlier. It was one of the precursors to board games, gaming community, and it's Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons, I started just after Gary Gygax had actually put out his series of 3 books, and those were small 9x6 paperbacks that were still available when I started out. But I started out with the hardbacks, and they were actually large 12 by 11 hardback books. And anyway, so role playing. And that's when I discovered role playing, because my friends and I, we really liked to do that kind of thing when we were kids. We had this game called City in our youth, and basically it was a cowboy town set in the West, and we would all pretend we were cowboys, and we'd run around and have our 6-shooters, which were cap guns, and there was a stable, and there was a blacksmith, and all the places. We built those places in the backyard, and then I ran the saloon. So I had a bar set up, and we would serve Kool-Aid flavored different things. And I'm getting sidetracked, but it sets you up for role play, because we're playing games. And I ran the casino, and we'd have shootouts in the street, and we have different scenarios that we would play in our imagination. And so when we came across Dungeons and Dragons, it was, wow, this is what we did when we were kids, and now we can do it, and it's acceptable when we're when we're 14, 15 years old. All right, I like that. So we really went into that. And I often was the what they called the dungeon master, which is the coordinator or game master. And so I ran scenarios, and I came up with all these great scenarios. Well, so I ran the game. Well, Dungeons & Dragons, role-playing, it's a fantasy setting with magic and monsters, and they had all these rules, but the beauty of it is you actually get to act out and play the game and use the medium of the rules. Well, but it was quite the thing, because it's fantasy, so it's monsters and magic and all that fun, and I would set up all these scenarios in which they would go through. Originally, Dungeons & Dragons literally was what they call a dungeon crawl. I think that's the current term for it now, where you just kind of go from one room to another, and you battle a beast, get a treasure, and you move on. Well, that's not the way I did it. I did it very similar to what some of the products that started coming out, the scenarios, where it was a complete adventure of life. And so it was like living the fantasy, and so it was very appealing, and we had a great time with it. So it was role playing. But the Dungeons and Dragons system we found to be kind of, I don't know, it was too closed of a box, and they had these weird rules. And so I started expanding as I got more mature and more understanding about what makes a good game. I started looking at other games and looking into SPI. At the time, SPI was big. They made things like Dragon Quest and Universe and Sniper Bug Hunter, and then there are other TSR came out with Star Frontiers, and there was Traveler, which a whole series, and that was science fiction setting role playing. And then there was one by TSR called Gamma World. Well, I kind of adapted Gamma World and made it into. I brought it into this fantasy realm, and then there were independent publishers that created maps and things. So I didn't have to do my own maps. I just got this, and my bedroom wall. We're talking about it must be 10 by 8 space, was covered with this map of a world that we all would play in. So we really were into it, and I came up with these. I adapted rules. I created rules so that the game would flow better. So the concentration was on the role playing and not the rules. So you weren't just calculating, rolling dice, and that wasn't it. It was the play. That was the medium. And then it was very interesting to discover that, as in life, there's unpredictability. They call it fog of war in games and some other things like that, right? Unpredictability. Well, that's what the dice simulate. And there was always this thing about critical hit and a critical miss. It doesn't matter how powerful you are, you could screw up. And you think about that in real life. You trip on the sidewalk, and even the best athletes do that. Well, it can happen. And then sometimes those things happen at the worst moment, or the critical hits happen at the best moment. Well, if you play this game enough, role playing, it turns out that's what happens in these games. You get to the point where you're experiencing life within a game, and yet the game's supposed to be a simulation of life. What came first? Art simulating game simulating, whatever. But you see what I mean? And so we really devoured it all. So I wrote up my own set of rules. And it was agglomeration. Then Star Wars hit. 1977. And oh, we just shifted to Star Wars. And of course, there was no Star Wars a game. I don't remember the original West End Games, I think it was, that came out with the first Star Wars. They got the first franchise from that. I think that's not what it's called.
The license.
Anyway, licensing, yeah. So they were the first license to get it. But anyway, so I just took the rules, the system that I came, and I called it the system. And we just took it and created scenarios and had a great time playing Star Wars. And it was so vivid in our mind that it was just great. We enjoyed it.
That's fantastic. So I have a really mixed history with Dungeons and Dragons. It's a game I've played multiple times. I played different iterations of it. And my favorite part of Dungeons and Dragons has to be with the role-playing in general. So I'm not a big fan of the combat in the game. I think it really bogs down, and it kind of plays to what you were saying, where the system has some kind of wonky kinks. But I do love the aspect of just interacting in this world that someone's created and being a character in that world. I have a lot of fun role-playing in general, and I think this is a perfect tool for that if you enjoy that experience of role-playing.
And also the role-playing aspect taught me about, that's where I adapted other games, and it suddenly became, that was the norm. So if there was any game we played, if some of the rules did not help with the game, didn't help with the flow, the interaction, it was too much dice rolling, too much luck, too much whatever, we would change the rules. And we would write the rules up, we'd change it so that it would play better, and we had a great time. And we did this with every game that we played, because a lot of people call those house rules.
Yeah.
And I think that if you look at the history of games, especially in the last decade, there's such a variety of games because people have done that. They've said, that's a great way to do things, but I can improve on it.
I think that is a very fair point, and you can see the evolution of this game as it's been progressing. It's in its like 5th iteration right now, 5e, if I remember correctly, something like that.
Yeah, I haven't played Dungeons and Dragons for decades, and I haven't done role playing in a couple decades too. I've got stuff. I've still got all sorts of stuff, and in my collection, I still have all these things, and I have it all. It's because I look back at it, because you spend a lot of time in it. That's why.
Oh yeah, it's a world of its own. Yeah,
it's a world of its own, and one that not only did my friends and I help create, I created the rules for it. So it just wow.
So speaking of creating these rules, there's actually something that I've been really interested in lately. It's called Harmon Quest. Have you ever heard of this, Dad?
No, I haven't.
So Harmon Quest takes a very famous writer, and he's known for his really, really well done comedy series. And he takes the idea of taking a group of actors and bringing them into D&D games, but it's his own modified version of this. So I think he actually takes the Pathfinder system, which is a iteration itself on D&D, but it takes this system and he boils it down to its core and just invites all these guests to participate on like one-off scenarios, but they all are part of this one large story. It's a really cool program. The writing is hilarious, the actors are hilarious, and the way that the dungeon master in this game performs his job, his duties, is incredible. So he is so free form on the way that he brings in the players' suggestions, their interactions with the world, and it's really interesting because he is the person who's doing all the dice rolling, so everybody just kind of goes with it. It's very free form. Everybody is responsible for their decisions, but the dungeon master plays as the randomist. So the gameplay is so smooth. The combat is quick. I think that this is the best version of this kind of role-playing style. If somebody would offer me to play a game in the same vein of the modified rules they do here, this is a role-playing game that I would join in a heartbeat. So
definitely. Now, this game that you're describing, pure role-playing, it allows for those people who have that capability to bring and express themselves and come up with ideas. But oftentimes you'll have people who aren't quite that quick and they don't have that experience in life that they can draw from and come up with ideas to generate solutions. And that's why I always did like the element of dice and the element of of powers and things that you had in front of you, so that they can sometimes take over or supplement the role play. Because if, let's say you had to try and persuade someone to do something, get you out of a tight spot, or lie at a customs agent or something like that. Well, if you've got someone who is an introvert and very difficult to express themselves, that becomes a chore. So it helps sometimes to actually make the role. And I'm just commenting because, that way you can get a lot more people into the game without ostracizing those that just aren't good at role playing. Well, Dungeons and Dragons is my number 2, and it just led into so many other role playing, and it spurred on my role playing interests. But it basically fell to the wayside when I was in college, because we just got involved into too many other things, and my gaming group kind of split apart, and we went to some of us went to different places, and then it was just hard to rekindle later on, because you need kind of a dedicated group, or a group that kind of thinks or plays in the same vein. And also was the time when, like I said, those kind of games started going downhill with the computers going up, and a lot of people didn't want to do that.
Good.
Okay, why don't you go with your number 2?
Okay. So my number 2, we actually talked about already. This is a wonderful game that you must have misplaced, because I have it right here. This is Masterpiece.
Oh, okay, I thought Claire had it.
So yeah, she was looking for it, but I took this a long time ago. I took this while I was back in college, so sorry. This is Masterpiece, the art auction game. And we talked about this a lot already on our list earlier.
You kids take all my stuff.
I'm not gonna lie, this was one I was not sorry about taking. I thought that this is a wonderful game. It has this awesome system of assigning random values to pieces of art, and these random values really dictate how you're going to behave as you play and how you're going to interact. I think it's a lot of fun. It's roll to move, of course, but there are ways that you can change up this randomness by getting rid of spots or by rolling multiple dice. I think that the auction system itself is really clever, where you have these fixed values, and there's like a pool of values that it could potentially be, and as the game goes, they get revealed, so the odds are going to get closer to certain extremities. And so it's about valuing how much buying a painting is worth and how much you're willing to spend to get that extra money. So getting money from paintings is very difficult. So I think it's really cool and really fun to kind of do the best you can in this art auction system. So we talked a lot about this already, but if you have anything else to add, Dad?
Sure. It's definitely a challenge to win this game.
Yes.
And I think that's another reason that why it's still enduring to us, because it presents such a challenge. There are games that are random and then luck based and such, but this one, it takes a special art to win. And if you are pretty consistent at that, that's not luck.
Absolutely. Now, there was this really great game that I remember vividly of this. I was playing with my friends in Nebraska, and there are 2 of the cards in this deck that are forgeries. And my friend passed me a forgery that I'd spent a couple $100,000 on, and he whispers in my ear, "I made it myself." And I just never forgot that moment. It was so funny, but I couldn't say anything at the time because I would have exposed that I just got past a forgery. I love it. I love it so much. This is a masterpiece.
Interesting about this game is I've discovered there are variants now that
Yes.
people have come up with, and they're kind of neat, these little variants. So if you, the audience, are really interested in this, trying it out yourself, trying to get it though is expensive. I've looked it up on eBay. They're expensive if you want to get this game. But anyway, you can play it and then try some of these variants, and it's worth getting. It really is. I think that you could pay the $50 or whatever it is on eBay. It's a game that's worth purchasing.
I totally agree. And
Careers too.
Yeah.
Careers too.
Careers is also a really good one. Without further ado, Dad, let's go ahead and jump to your number 1.
Oh, my number 1. Okay. So my number 1 is it takes me back to my youth. When I was a small kid, I really enjoyed tanks. I'm talking about armored fighting vehicles, tanks. And so I had these little miniature 72nd scale tanks that you could buy, kind of like Hot Wheels, except that they were tanks and you'd buy them in a package. And I was addicted to those. And I would do anything for one of those. And then there was this company that made these miniatures HO scale, which is similar to 72nd scale. And anyway, I had those too. And, well, I was a kid. I would battle with them on the table, in the dirt. We'd go out what we used to call the wide world, which was there was an adjacent lot to our house in where I grew up, which my dad had bought as a buffer between the neighbors. You know, he said, you know, I want my house here. So it was called the wide world, and we'd go play in the wide world, and it was dirt and trees and just a great place to play. And so we'd have battles, and my friends and I would have battles. And as we got a little older, instead of just pretend, we started using, as they were kind of like miniatures, and we would take, we had a stick, and the stick had all these lines on it, and you know, like bazooka range and Panzerfaust range, and you know, 88 range, and so forth. And we measure out our ranges, and we thought we were so sophisticated. Well, and during that time, I was just so interested in World War II. I was a real World War II buff. I mean, I could, especially the Western Front, I could really tell you all about all the German vehicles, Panzerkampfwagen, you know, Mark 1 through 7. I could tell you their calibers, how thick their armor was. It was just incredible. I had all this stuff, and I was just loved. And then in 1977, Avalon Hill came out with a game that's called Squad Leader. So this did it for me, because let's see, how old was I when I started playing this? I was in high school when this came out, and so I don't want to tell you my real age. So anyway, I was in high school, and so boom, this came out, and this was manna from heaven, because I just loved everything about it, because it detailed, it's a game that's on the squad level, and it's two-sided. It's a tactical combat simulation. Now, I made some notes about it so I could condense it. Anyway, so it's set in Europe during World War II, and it put the Germans and their allies, the Finns, against the Allied powers, depending on the scenario, the Russians or the British or the Americans. And it was the squad level, so that you're talking about 8 people. Each piece represents about 8 people or so, and individual fighting vehicles like tanks and anti-tank guns and cannons and other things. It was all individual pieces, and it's put on put on hexagonal boards, and the hexagonal boards depict different terrains that match up with each other. There you go. And if you notice, it's like a Google Earth view. So you see the trees, you see the houses, and your pieces are, now somebody's kind of spread out the pieces so that you can see them. Let's see, yeah, that picture. If you notice, if you look closely at that picture, you'll see little white dots in each of the hexes. And those white dots represent line of sight dots, so that when your piece is in a hex, so if you're in a hex in a building, can you see over several hexes away? Well, you get your slot, your rule, or your string, which we usually use just a rule, but you could use a string too. And can you see? So if you can see, you can shoot. But anyway, so you so it's a very detailed and complex game, with each side placing, with multiple phases in which the units fire and move, and then there were additional phases in which broken units had to flee for cover, and opposing units in the same hex engaged in close-to-close combat. So there are various scenarios which opposing sides would have specific units and vehicles and cannons and other heavy weapons at the start. Each side would have their set of objectives to win the game. So you played in scenarios, and you played on these boards, and well, it was really detailed and complex, and so it was really rules heavy. Oh, it was so rules heavy. But at the time, I liked that. And once it's kind of like watching Mackenzie play Yu-Gi-Oh! And I go watch your Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournaments, and you guys would go through the game like that quick because you all memorized the cards. You knew what the cards did. You knew the impact of each move, and you didn't have to read anything. You just played the card everyone knew, and you went on. Well, that's kind of what you would get with these complex rules. You play the game enough that you know the rules, you know how it works, and it becomes easy, even though it was a complex start. It's kind of like learning medicine. It's very complex, but once you get to it, it just kind of goes. But that's what made it so neat is the detail. The devil was in the details, and it allowed a great simulation. And well, so then later on, it came out with expansions, which Cross of Iron, which took you on to the Eastern Front, so more detailed. This is where more Germans came in. I forget who else came in. And more Russian pieces, more tanks, and then crescendo of Doom, which added British units and further boards and further rules, more rules. And then eventually came GI Anvil of Victory, which really emphasized the Americans, and it was great. We played this on end. Now, a drawback of the game was that you could see your opponent's pieces on the map, so you always knew where the opponent was, and so you could bring your forces to marshal your forces against them. Well, we were doing role playing at the time. What happens with role playing? You don't know what's going on. So there would be a game master running the scenario. And so I bought doubles of everything. And so we would have, in my room, I had half a ping pong table. So you know how big a ping pong table is. So take, they fold in half, so half of one. And we would put a screen down the middle, set the boards, identical boards on both sides, have identical pieces, and then the game master would run the show so that both sides didn't know where the other guys were. And so he would do the line of sight checks, and the game master would if you were moving your pieces, he'd move them on the side that you could be seen. So it was really cool. It was like the fog of war. It was like you didn't know what was going on, and so you'd go in and you'd send out your scouts. It was like real combat. It just made the game so much better. That was the way to play. It was really intense for the game master to play it, but if you're in that role and you're thinking that, you get everyone takes a turn at game master, and so it just made it great. There was one scenario that my objectives, I was the German, and my objectives was to take these areas, and so I thought in my mind, I'm going to gamble. I'm going to go for high risk. I'm going to put all my guys on half tracks, and we're just going to roll around and take that. Well, it turns out that it was a bad idea because my opponent, I didn't send scouts or anything. I just blitzkrieg. I thought, yeah. Well, I went right into the teeth of my opponent, and I was just mowed down. The game was over in just a little while. But it was fun. It was just so great. We made it, again, changing the rules to make it better. And we played this for years. It was just an awesome game. I don't know what it's like now, but eventually the games have, let's see, what was that called? Close Assault. I think Close Assault was the computer version. And
okay.
Yeah, Close Assault. It was squad leader on the computer, and you as the individual had to control and move you could click and move some of your pieces, but the war kept going on, and the computer was the game master. Yeah, but that one just wasn't as exciting as using the pieces and being able to, look across the screen and see your opponent squirm or laugh at you. Yeah, so I think it's that interaction element that I still like. That's why I just don't do computer games. There's no interaction,
That's
Anyway.
excellent. So
Yeah.
I definitely remember you talking about this game a lot. I remember the story of the ping pong tables, and I think that this sounds like a wonderful experience. If you got somebody that's willing to game master that, then I say go for it. It sounds like you added a level to this game that really elevates it, and I can see why it's your number one. I think this is a great pick.
Yeah, the complexity was there, but that's what gave it a lot of the charm to it, is because it was so detailed. You know, it wasn't like you didn't have to incorporate a lot of suspension of disbelief.
Mhm.
It was there. I mean, you knew, oh, gee, there's a tiger tank coming. We're screwed. And that was the way it was in real life.
Absolutely.
So what's your number one?
So my number one is something you alluded to, and it's got that same feeling that you have with Squad Leader, where it became a lifestyle game that I was introduced to at a young age, and I played for years. So this is a game that I played all the way through college until I finally just really had enough of it, because I started playing board games, and I really enjoy the feeling of this this hobby over this huge competitive nature of this game, and that's going to be Yu-Gi-Oh! So Yu-Gi-Oh! It's a no-brainer here. Yu-Gi-Oh! Was a huge part of my life for a long time. Went to a lot of tournaments. You got lots of these mats. This is my favorite one. It's like one of the only ones I kept. I ended up selling most of my stuff, but Yu-Gi-Oh! It played a huge part in just my development as a person and my experiences overall. So in Yu-Gi-Oh! You play as a duelist. Your job is to take out your opponent's 8,000 life points using your carefully constructed deck of cards. Now, this game separates itself from other trading card games by having your cards be the resources. There are no resource costs in this game. So in a lot of games like Magic the Gathering or Harry Potter the card game, you're going to be using mana sources. So you'll have a card that actually represents a resource, and you'll exhaust it or tap it or something, and that's going to be the cost to play the card. In Yu-Gi-Oh! You just play the card and you do what it says. So there's no attachment to a specific resource. You can just play every single card in your hand, so your cards are your resources. So this game is all about maintaining card advantage, making sure that you have more things than your opponent has, and trying to obtain value throughout the game. Now, this game has evolved drastically from the early days. Before, it was all about just having the highest numbers and making sure that your characters are able to defeat the others. But in more modern times, it's all become a game about reactions, making sure that you're able to counter things before you even have a turn, and setting up these gigantic boards of monsters that can threaten to take out your opponent while controlling anything they might do against you. So it's more about negation and prevention than it is about just kind of summoning monster after monster and having head-to-head battles. So Yu-Gi-Oh! Really has evolved into this gigantic competitive format, and I played in this format for a really long time. Like I said, all throughout college and in high school, I would be going to card shops, and in college I did a lot of traveling. Almost every weekend we would go to a different regional tournament, and this kind of culminated in me winning the Yu-Gi-Oh! National Championships for the TCG Player National Championships. So they only ever had one of these tournaments, and TCG Player does a lot of these for Magic the Gathering, but they had one for Yu-Gi-Oh! That year, and I represented Nebraska, oddly enough. So I was visiting Nebraska at the time, and I won their tournament. So I went to the TCG Player tournament as the competitor for Nebraska, which was really funny, and I ended up winning the whole thing. And it was a lot of fun. I love the different strategies, and I love the different card play, the combos, and like you said with Squad Leader, you could look at a card, know exactly what it does, and if you're kind of absorbed by this lexicon of information in this space, you can instantly think of applications and effects and decks that you could build with a single card reveal. So it was cool to have this community that was also involved, people from all over the country that were involved in this game, and it's still a thing today. You can go to these large tournaments, you can find people that are very, very much steeped into this game space, and I think it's a really fascinating part of the hobby. I think it's a great way to make friends. I think it's a great way to enjoy yourself and enjoy gaming. But honestly, after playing board games and seeing how it's so accessible for people to join, and there's not that barrier of entry of having to learn all these things, I really do prefer board games over card games like this. But I have to give credit to Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! Was a huge part of my life. It's something that I really enjoyed doing, and I had a lot of fun with it. But I'm very happy that I've moved on to other things. But very happy for that experience.
You know, Mackenzie, you're very humble the way you tell your story. You said you had left the game. Remember that you moved to Hawaii and you tried to find people to play, and you just discovered that there was no competition for you. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that you would play, and it was like shooting, fish in a barrel. It was just too easy for you. And I remember you were just totally disappointed. It was just, kind of like, I don't know. It was just total disappointment. Legitimate humility there. Golly, Dad, there isn't anyone really worth playing. And I laugh because, you're just too good.
It was a lot of fun. I really like the game. I like the system. I like that there's no resources, so the cards do exactly what they say. And I like that you have interplay on both players' turns. So if you do something, your opponents can react to what you're doing. Now,
I played it for many years with you.
Yes,
you and Jordan, and I enjoyed it greatly, but it just got so big. And and then you and Jordan, especially your skill level, you're just tromping me, and it was like, okay, I've done my job as a parent. You're good.
I remember vividly, though, you hosted when Yu-Gi-Oh! Was in like its prime, I think, in the United States. You hosted a tournament for not only my friends, but also some of Jordan's friends and my older brother's friends. And we all brought it to the house, and we had 2 separate tournaments go. We had a 1v1 tournament and a tag team tournament. And I remember it vividly because I was the one that was really engrossed in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Competitive scene, but I still lost to my older brother in this like at-home tournament game. And I got second place in both of the competitions. Now, I do think it was rigged because in the tag team mode, you came up with some dumb tiebreaker rule for like if you did the most damage, you won, and it didn't matter if you had tied for victory. Like we were playing my friend and I were playing 2 alternate win condition decks, so we didn't even know about the tiebreaker until you started. So we were playing for those alternate win conditions, so we weren't even doing damage, but we were still winning. It was still fun though. But I just remember being robbed of my first place victory.
And as you see, I've done things with my kids, all their interests. I've been right in the thick of it and helping them and supporting them. And my kids have been wonderful, every one of them. And I've always been there, cheering them on, walking with them, and I do that to this day. I've had a wonderful experience with my children, and I continue to this day. So, Mackenzie, thank you very much for inviting me to this.
Oh, it's a blast to have you on.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Wow. Did you have any honorable mentions or anything that you wanted to talk about?
The only other honorable mention I have really is the Pokemon trading card game. It's not one that I really latched onto. I think we were more into the collecting aspect as a child, but it was one that we did play every so often. We did use some modified rules. You even created this game that used the cards in an alternate way, and I thought that was a blast. But I actually play, out of all these games, I actually play Pokemon the most, which is really funny because at my school that I work at, I actually run a Pokemon TCG club. So I am teaching kids constantly how to play the Pokemon trading card game. And there are some kids that will bring their Yu-Gi-Oh cards. So I do have these 2 Yu-Gi-Oh decks. It's the only Yu-Gi-Oh I have left, but I'll pull out these 2 Yu-Gi-Oh decks and we can play that as well. So it's fun to kind of go back and teach these kids to play. And I often am just going to give them some cards. That way they can improve their decks. It's really fun. I like kind of paying it forward. It's neat.
You make a father very happy because that's it. You're using the same medium to teach and to build love and fun and interaction, and it's wonderful. It's really wonderful. Wow. Thank you, Mackenzie. And the game, Pokemon. You're right. I made a game using the cards where you had to travel, just like. Wasn't there a show? It was the show.
Like the
and you had to go to different gyms.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You had to go to the different gyms and battle that Pokemon Masters monsters, right? And you had to battle the cards. You didn't know which card you were going to get, and you had to travel around to do that. Well, interestingly enough, a year or so after I made my game, that game was made by the makers who did Pokemon. Which was
really cool. You anticipated Pokemon Master Trainer, but I do think your version was a little bit more straightforward and a lot more fun. So
well, because it also used your cards.
Yeah.
It used your cards, and so the better cards you had, the more the game was. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like I said, when you use your own thing, it's cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
So it
thanks
was a
so
lot of
much,
fun.
Dad. I really appreciate you coming on today, despite all of the internet connection issues. But it was a blast talking to you and just kind of hearing your history and your experience with games and what kind of formed you and how you formed me and how that all kind of compiled. Really awesome. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. Anything you want to add before we log off today?
Well, gaming, I think gaming complements you. It's part of it becomes part of your nature, and it helps you with all the other things that you do. I bet a lot of people wouldn't even guess my occupation. What's my vocation as well. But
Oh,
the
you work at
gaming,
McDonald's, right?
pardon me,
You work at
McDonald's,
McDonald's,
yeah.
right?
But so I use this, and you did too. I have used gaming in everything I do. So I do a lot of teaching. I teach wilderness medicine. I teach nurse practitioner students medicine, and I use these kind of ways that we play games in that. And then I also use games themselves to teach. I did Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts for years, and I used gaming to help drive and teach and bring kids together, and I know that you've done it too. I've seen you started using the same techniques that games provide when you were doing an externship at Boys Town in Omaha, and you do that currently in your job in teaching when you were in Hawaii. I mean, this is gaming just refines you. I think it's a wonderful thing, and it keeps you young. See. Well, thank you again. Thank you very much thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Dad. Once again, really happy to have you on, and thanks for sharing this conversation with me.
Well, I'd love to join you again in another topic, whatever you'd like to talk.
Absolutely. I think overall this stream was successful. We got all of the programs working. I think it worked smoothly when it came to putting up title cards and when it came to like going back and forth from us to the screens. So I think this is something I'm very comfortable in, and I'd love to have you back on. This was a blast.
Great.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. And I had a lot of fun looking up these things, in the week. I was very busy this week, but it was good as an aside, so that it gave me a little time off to think about some fun and reminisce, and so I do appreciate that part of it.
Great. Thanks so much, Dad. Have a great rest of your Saturday. Thanks everybody for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye, Game Strong, y'all. Bye.
Bye-bye.